So sitting here with my beautiful wife and Tom and Sharyn Miller, and we're talking about some of the early days of Crossroads. Started this church back in September of 2007. She'll correct me if I'm wrong on the dates, but it was a crazy time in life. We had 5 kids, most of them very young, and trying to figure out how to start this church, something we'd never done before. And Patty, I'm sure you enjoyed many early Sunday mornings dressing kids in the van.
Yes, we would get up really early on Sunday morning to drive over, and we had a newborn and we had a 2-year-old. So it was interesting to me because I'm like, okay, I have to refocus what I'm doing. So I would gather everybody's clothes up at night, and then I put them in the van, and we had a big old conversion van, and we would get to church, and while they were unloading the equipment, the 2 Daves, our oldest son and Dave, they would unload the equipment, and then I would dress the kids in the vehicle and get them something to eat, and then we would come out ready for service.
Yeah, we're glad that van had blinds you could pull down.
It was awesome.
Because nobody could see. It was like Superman's phone booth, and all of a sudden you came out. It's like the perfect family ready for Sunday morning. But there's a lot, even as we've been talking here today, there is a lot that's kind of a blur in those first few years. Patty was so busy with the kids and homeschooling them, and I was working 2 to 3 jobs depending on the season because we didn't have financial support and we had a very small congregation. We had made it to our 1-year anniversary, and I remember this day so distinctly. We were going to have a little dinner at the fire department afterwards to celebrate. And I was just worn out. My soul was tired. And I was trying to figure out, how do I quit? How do we kind of shut the church down without disappointing the people that were there? We had doubled in that first year, but it was still a small group of people, about 60 people. And so we did the service that day. My friend Pastor Robert preached. He preached a great message. It was very encouraging. But I was just so tired inside. And I remember all of us, we loaded the equipment up. Everybody went ahead of us to that fire department to have our spaghetti dinner that day. And I'm sitting in the van now in that parking lot by myself. And I'm just worn out. And I'm thinking, what do I do? And as I looked around the van, at that time the offering still went with me. Somebody else counted it, but it still went with me, and it was in a basket. And I looked down, and a check was kind of peeking at me. And it had the name of Thomas and Sharyn Miller on it. And I didn't even really see the amount, but for some reason I picked it up and I opened it up, and it was $5,000. Now, we had never got a check for $5,000. That didn't happen very often. Didn't happen at all. And as I read that check, first of all, I didn't even really know who you were. It had a Pittsburgh address on it. And I just began to cry. And I'm just weeping, and I'm weeping, and I'm weeping. And it wasn't the amount of money. It wasn't the amount of money. It was someone saying, we believe in what you're doing. Don't quit. And so as I sat there and I cried, and I'll cry again as I'm telling the story, I thought, okay, if someone believes in us this much, let's give it 1 more year. We're not going to quit. And I can honestly say since that day, I've never seriously thought about quitting again. I wanted to talk to you guys and ask you a couple of things. Number 1, do you remember that offering? and number 2, when you gave it, did you have any idea that God would use that offering to fuel the next 12 years of ministry here at Crossroads?
Yeah. Well, absolutely, we do remember it, and the reason I think we remember it primarily is because it was such a God-directed thing as we look back on it. The history of that offering is interesting. Years before, probably 5 years before, around 2003, 2004, we had friends who asked us for a loan. Well, that's something we never do. We're not in the business of making loans to people, even our friends. But this particular couple we had known for a long time. We were involved in their lives. We knew they were going through some significant struggles, so we made an exception. and we made a loan to that couple, and frankly, we didn't think of it as a loan. We thought of it as a gift. We thought there was not a chance in the world that that loan was ever going to be repaid. And over the next several years, our suspicions were confirmed. They never mentioned the loan. We never mentioned the loan. They never made any payment on the loan. And again, we thought we'd made a gift and we forgot about it. Well, then in August 2008, right before that first anniversary of Crossroads Church, I got a call from this guy. And he said, "We sold our business. We made some money. We can repay the loan." And after I picked myself up off the floor, I said, "Wow, that's great." He said, "Should I send you a check?" Yeah, I said, "That would be a great idea. Send me a check." And so he did. He couldn't do his word. We got a check for the full amount, the $5,000 loan. And then the question was, what do we do with it? Because this was, to us, it was found money. We never thought we were going to see this money again. It wasn't part of our budget, so the question was, okay, what do we do with it? Well, Tom, in his usual fashion, started talking about things like boats and cars and vacations. And Sharyn, in her usual fashion, said, "Why don't we give it to that church we're going to?" We had just started going to this little church meeting in the Garrett Cinema in Garrett County, where we were coming down on the weekends. We were still living in Pittsburgh, but on the weekends we were commuting to the lake, and we had started going to Crossroads Church a few months before that. We knew that the church was having some financial issues, and so it seemed like a great idea to take that money, which we had not planned on ever receiving, and giving it to God. I think it was probably 2 or 3 years after that that you shared with us what you had been going through at that time. And wow, when you told us that, it was an epiphany for us. It was like the fog lifting. We saw the clear hand of God working to establish this church in Garrett County. From that loan that we made in 2003, to our friend selling his business, to making the decision to give that money to Crossroads Church, and the impact that had on your decision to continue God's plan for you in establishing his church in Garrett County. It was just an amazing example to us of the hand of God working to do his work and his plan for you in your life.
Sharyn, when you look back now, you guys have been here, since the early days, and you've seen hundreds of baptisms and baby dedications and couples get married and decisions made for Jesus. How does that make you feel when you realize that in that one act of obedience on that Sunday morning in September of that year, that you guys wrote out that check and you put it in? How does it make you feel that God used that to create all this ministry?
I'm just amazed. I never dreamed that we would grow to the extent we have. When I heard the story of you almost quitting and not, I cried. I still will cry. I hoped that we would just be able to move out of the movie theater. That was my hope. To see us having a chance now to grow even more with a bigger building, it just is mind-boggling, and I give all the glory to the Lord.
Yeah, amen. Yeah. I think one of the things we want people to see and understand as we walk through this spiritual journey that we're calling Greater Things is that money is truly spiritual. It's when we give an offering to God, it just doesn't go to pay a light bill or pay a salary or take care of paving the parking lot. It's spiritual. He does something miraculous with what we give, and it's all through Scripture. We can see it, but when we get to share a story like this, we see it right here today, working in Garrett County. Patty, we've seen this numerous times over the years in our lives as we felt like God was directing us to give. and then the next thing you know, he does something incredible with it, or he gives it back to us in ways that we could have never dreamed, And I hope that people, as we walk through this kind of journey together, that people will really get a hold of this and see that we're not just trying to build a building so we can say we have more seats and our attendance number goes up. We know that God is working in Garrett County in incredible ways. Ways sometimes that we get to see, sometimes we don't even get to see until years later, like this story. So we just want to thank you guys for that act of obedience. Not only for that act of obedience, but you've been such great supporters along the way, from everything from pulling weeds and painting floors at Camp Deep Creek to taking care of babies. And we did stop letting you count the money, though, because math is not your gift.
Math is not our strong point. And we want to thank you guys. The Marshes have meant so much to us over the years, and Crossroads Church has meant so much to us. The story we have about Crossroads could be repeated many, many times over, and will be repeated going forward many, many times over. And we are just so thankful, Pastor Dave, that you did not return to Indiana and you continued God's plan for you here in Garrett County. Every Sunday morning when we take the offering, you or Chris or Brandon or somebody prays over that offering. And oftentimes the prayer they make is that God will take our gifts and multiply them. And boy, when we look back on that morning when we dropped that check into the offering basket, all we can say is God is awfully good at math. He multiplies our gifts so many times over and over, and we are so very blessed and thankful.